begins a major anti-terror operation in the Syrian provinces of Homs and Idlib using its biggest naval vessel. Meanwhile, for a 29th day now, Moscow is holding back on airstrikes against militant positions in Aleppo. Clashes erupt in Greece as Barack Obama visits the NATO member in a bid to cement ties with the US before Donald Trump moves into the Oval Office.
Disgusted as I am with Donald Trump, I hope that precisely the shock of electing him will maybe trigger some restructuring of the entire political space.
Prominent Slovenian philosopher Slavoi Zizek explains why he thinks Donald Trump's presidency will trigger restructuring of the entire US political system. And a French industrial giant faces legal action over claims it paid taxes to Islamic State in Syria to keep one of its factories working. The company, meantime, denies any business links with terrorists. Just turning midday here in Moscow. Thanks for joining us. It's RT International. In the wake of the US election, Russia has resumed pounding Syrian militant positions with increased ferocity, with its biggest ship now coasted up off the coast of Syria. The flagship of the Russian naval group taking part in the operation is that aircraft carrier right there, the Admiral Kuznetsov, Russia's largest ship and only aircraft carrier. An RT crew is currently on board, and Igor Zhdanov filed this report.
We are currently on the way to Admiral Kuznetsov, the flagship of the Russian Navy in Syria. It will take this search and rescue helicopter roughly 30 minutes to get there from the Russian air base in Latakia, as we will be landing on the aircraft carrier itself.
This is Russia's largest warship. Almost 2,500 people man the Kuznetsov. When we arrived, it was abuzz with activity. The Kuznetsov is carrying dozens of brand new fighter jets as well as combat and search and rescue helicopters. They've been busy carrying out practice flights and perfecting takeoffs, landings and air maneuvers, with the ultimate goal, of course, of defeating terrorism in Syria.
This fighter jet is fully ready for combat, and one of the armaments it carries is this bomb. It's a high-precision weapon. It weighs 500 kilograms and explodes within 1.5 meters from a target.
And with the last preparations complete, it's time for action. Fighter jets have just taken off from the Admiral Kuznetsov for the first time for an actual combat mission, on which they will target terrorist command centers, weapons factories and stockpiles in the Syrian provinces of Idlib and Homs. But their mission is only part of the greater tactical game plan. Another Russian warship, the Admiral Grigorovich, led by the Kuznetsov, launched strikes with Caliber missiles, high-precision weapons capable of hitting a target from thousands of kilometers away and virtually impossible to shoot down. While from the Syrian coast, a Bastion system battered terrorist positions with supersonic Onyx missiles. We didn't see that from the carrier, but we weren't short on spectacle. But formidable air power and size aren't the only things that make the Admiral Kuznetsov special.
Unlike many other warships in its class, Admiral Kuznetsov is actually capable of defending itself. For example, these Kinjal or dagger missiles, their main purpose is defending this aircraft carrier from incoming aerial attacks. And as a whole, Admiral Kuznetsov can also protect itself from enemy warships and planes.
The Admiral Kuznetsov did not come alone. It is leading a naval group of about 10 warships, and their presence hasn't gone unnoticed.
This helicopter is not from any of the ships in this naval group, and it has been watching us for days. Our commanders, our officers on this ship are telling us that it is from one of the NATO's warships in the region.
Igor Zhdanov from Admiral Kuznetsov, RT.
The operation in Syria does not include the key city of Aleppo, where Russia's military hasn't carried out any strikes for almost a month in order to allow civilians and what Moscow describes as sane opposition to leave. However, the militants have used this pause to step up their drive against President Assad's forces in the city. RT's Murad Gazdiev has been filing reports from the area for several weeks. Here's a compilation, though a warning up ahead. You may find some of this footage disturbing.
The message was, stop bombing Aleppo and the suffering ends.
It could stop tomorrow morning, tonight, if Russia and the Assad regime were to behave according to any norm.
So they did. From the 18th of October, Russian jets disappeared from the skies over eastern Aleppo. There hasn't been a single airstrike in 4 weeks. As for the rebels, we're in the Al-Assad summer. And the rebels are pushing into Aleppo again. They attacked. Twice they tried to break into the city. Rebel shells pummeled Aleppo every day, without a pause for breath. Just over the last month, the list of civilians killed and injured runs into the hundreds. Schools, universities, houses. At times, the entire city shook from the ferocity of the shelling. We've spent 6 weeks in Aleppo. In all that time, not a single civilian has been allowed to leave the rebel part of the city. Every effort to defuse the situation, including unilateral ceasefires, failed. On a number of occasions, we filmed al-Nusra's black flag flying on the front line. According to all evidence, they are the power in eastern Aleppo, and the message they were sending was clear. No one leaves.
I left my house as soon as the shelling started, but on my way I inhaled something. I felt a sharp pain in my chest and went to hospital. They took blood for analysis. I felt I was suffocating, as if from some sort of chemical or poison gas.
It's all escalated towards the end of October, when jihadists, angry at being repelled, began shelling the city with artillery rounds infused with chlorine gas. After 4 weeks without a single Russian airstrike, the situation has only deteriorated. In the face of repeated rebel attacks and merciless shelling, thousands have fled their homes, forced deeper into, not out of the city. Kerry's promised solution had been a complete failure. Murad Gazdiev, RT, in Damascus.
The US State Department has criticized Russia's operation while accusing Moscow of recently hitting numerous hospitals in Syria. However, the spokesperson didn't show any specifics or any facts.
So we have seen that. We strongly condemn the resumption of airstrikes in Syria by the Russians as well as the Syrian regime. The most recent reported attacks are on 5 hospitals and 1 mobile clinic in Syria. We believe it's a violation of international law.
We don't know where Elizabeth Trudeau gets her information about what's happening in Syria. The repeated rumours about 5 hospitals and 1 mobile clinic that are claimed to have been hit by the Russian Air Force just go to show that the rhetoric of the State Department on Syria is based on blatant lies.
It's become really ludicrous how the US has been playing with the situation in Syria over the recent months, and the near desperation of the Obama administration to actually get the situation escalated before the end of the administration. The US has zero influence over the moderate or other rebel groups, the jihadi groups. In fact, it's hard to say whether there are any effective moderate political groups on the ground fighting against the Assad government in Syria.
Police in Athens have used tear gas on demonstrators protesting the visit of US President Barack Obama. The outgoing leaders bidding to reassure Europe of Washington's commitment to its vital NATO ally.
We are deeply grateful for our alliance with the Greek people. I think that we have inspired each other to reach for independence, stood in solidarity during war and peace. In good times and in bad, including these very difficult years for the Greek people. And tonight I want you to know that as you work to move your country forward, you will always have the support and friendship of the United States. We have an extraordinary Greek-American community that is very excited about this visit.
And since the US presidential election, pundits have been struggling to explain Donald Trump's shock win. A prominent Slovenian philosopher, Slavoi Zizek, is one of them. He believes the result exposes the failure of the liberal elite. My colleague Daniel Hawkins asked Mr. Zizek to explain why he believes that Trump's victory might help to revamp America's political system.
The Democrats were, in this election, the pure party of the establishment of the ruling consensus. So, disgusted as I am with Donald Trump, I hope that precisely the shock of electing him will maybe trigger some restructuring of the entire political space where new options will maybe emerge, like an authentic leftist movement around Bernie Sanders and others.
Do you think Bernie Sanders could have shaken up the US political system as much as Trump, or perhaps had he been the Democratic candidate,
Absolutely.
we may even have a different president?
Absolutely, and I go even further. Hillary's defeat was, at least in one of his aspects, the price she paid for getting rid of Bernie Sanders. Her coalition was absurd. Her coalition was Wall Street and Occupy Wall Street, Saudi Arabian money and LGBT and all those sexual liberation movements. It was a fake ideological formation. It was brutal global capitalism with a human face.
In the run-up to the election, most mainstream media, as well as most mainstream polls, were predicting overwhelmingly a Hillary Clinton victory. Why did they fail to see this coming?
The Democratic strategist totally misread why and in what way people identify with Trump. Most of us who were observing the electoral process remember how often left liberal media claimed, now we caught Donald Trump with his pants down in an open embarrassment when he said something improper or made a mistake, and they thought, now this is his end, he committed suicide. No, not only he didn't, this even helped him, because ordinary people didn't identify with an ideal Trump. They perceived him as one of us precisely through his vulgarities, mistakes, and so on and so on. That's how political identification works. That's a big lesson.
The liberal Americans, who are very angry about the election of Trump, the calling for his impeachment, they're blaming what they call uneducated people for electing him. Is that really where the blame lies? People just not being educated enough to make the right decision?
That's the horror. No, the true loser is the liberal elite, which simply lost contact with anxieties and so on of the ordinary people. And liberal elites, I suspect them of this smug self-satisfaction. They even like to lose, so that they can then, with a moralistic self-satisfaction, blame the others. You see, primitive, ordinary people, why are they primitive? They were not always primitive. They fall into these primitive passions because the alternative, what they, the elite, was offering them no longer works. So, again, begin with self-criticism.
And with Donald Trump being a political newcomer, Americans are paying very close attention to his first appointment as a sign of things to come. And here's how the lineup is looking so far.
Experienced when it comes to running companies, not so much when it comes to countries. So the people Trump's rapidly assembling around him provide the first glimpse of just what Team USA will look like under Team Trump. His running mate and now Vice President-elect is, of course, Mike Pence. Unlike Trump, he's a weathered politician. With 6 terms of Congress under his belt, he knows how things work on Capitol Hill. Here's how Pence describes himself.
I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican, in that order.
Trump's supposed top choice to head his foreign office is Rudy Giuliani. Giuliani was at the helm of New York when the Twin Towers came crashing down. And such was his handling and response, he was lovingly nicknamed America's Mayor. Time magazine went even further, naming him Person of the Year in 2001. Despite a total lack of foreign policy experience, he's already hinted at his priorities.
We must not be afraid to define our enemy. It is Islamic extremist terrorism.
Moving on, Republican Party Chairman Reince Priebus is expected to become the Chief of Staff. He's Trump's man within the party, and actually good friends with House of Representatives Speaker Paul Ryan. He's also Trump's confidant.
Reince is really a star, and he is the hardest working guy. My guy.
And now finally to Trump's most sensational appointment. Steve Bannon could become his senior counselor. Who's Steve Bannon, you ask? Well, he was Trump's campaign head, and before that, the executive chairman of Breitbart News. That's a right-wing news site that also prides itself as a platform for the alternative right movement. That makes Bannon anti-Washington, anti-establishment, and actually not even a fan of Trump's very own party.
We don't really believe there is a functional conservative party in this country. We certainly don't think the Republican Party is that.
So, does the team forming around him show when it comes to his plans for running the country, Donald has come up trumps?
I think if people understand President Trump, he likes taking opinions from a lot of different people. He's not a person that just listens to one person and does whatever that one person says.
Trump advisor and former CIA Director James Woolsey has sat down with RT's Worlds Apart to discuss the prospects for Trump's presidency. He also spoke about potential cabinet appointments. In fact, Woolsey himself is tipped as a potential addition to the team.
Well, I don't know that it will be the establishment as establishment. I think it will probably be individuals who would normally be regarded as part of the establishment, but who are willing to work for him, with him, and to make some changes in American policies. Health care is one that's due for very substantial changes, and we'll just have to see. But I think he will be able to recruit people to help him, and I think they'll be able people.
Shocked by Donald Trump's unexpected win, Democrats are trying to figure out a strategy to combat him and a Republican-dominated Congress in the coming months. With that aim, billionaire Clinton ally George Soros has called an emergency conference in Washington to strategize how to disrupt Trump's administration that he is currently putting together. Here's Guy Chichikan.
Democratic politicians, advocacy groups are gearing up to resist the Trump administration. They held 3 days of meetings behind closed doors with their key donors at this hotel in Washington, D.C. Donors including billionaire George Soros, who was one of Hillary Clinton's top donors. Exactly what their plan is to resist Donald Trump is not clear to us at this time. We were able to speak with only one participant of the conference. The rest we approached refused to speak. But here's what he said.
I think the goal of this conference is to figure out where, as a community and as a space, we can go from here, as to organize our families and really talk about the next 4 years as a real fight, not only to protect our families, but also to ensure that we're still moving forward and the issues that matter to our communities.
A fight against what?
Fight against the very racist and misogynist and very really violent tones that the Trump presidency can and will bring. You see it already now from who he's assigning to his transition team.
Did the conference come up with ways to challenge Trump?
You want to answer that?
Yeah, I'm okay.
No. Not yet. We're still working on that.
Many Americans see Trump as a racist and a bigot and refuse to accept his win in the election. There's now a petition to upend the Electoral College vote, which gave Trump his victory and make Hillary Clinton president. The petition has over 4 million supporters. This is despite President Obama, who vigorously campaigned against Trump, now urging Americans to accept the outcome of the vote.
The people have spoken. Donald Trump will be the next president, the 45th president of the United States. Those who didn't vote for him have to recognize that that's how democracy works. That's how this system operates.
While thousands of people across the country did not need any prompting to take to the streets to protest Donald Trump, advocacy groups did help organize some of the protests. For example, a group called Move On put out a press release last week, the day after Trump's win, saying that they helped organize over 200 gatherings nationwide. Are we going to see more of that? Well, at this time, it is not clear toward what actions exactly the big anti-Trump donors are going to direct their resources. In Washington, I'm Ganesh Chekyan, RT.
Protests against the Dakota Access Oil Pipeline have now gone nationwide in America. The story for you in just a moment.
People with stories to tell. Those who deserve to be heard. Studied inside out, but still with unrevealed secrets. Leaders, politicians, thinkers, and witnesses. They're here to speak. Are you there to hear?
Here's what people have been saying about Redacted tonight.
Give it to us.
Redacted is full-on awesome.
Really?
The only show I go out of my way to watch every week. It really packs a punch. Lee Camp is the John Oliver of RT America.
They do have the same accent.
Hey, we are apparently better than boobs.
Nothing's better than boobs.
You see, people you've never heard of love Redacted tonight. The president of the World Bank, though, hates it.
Yeah, he doesn't really have any taste.
Seriously, if you send us an email.
Thanks for joining us. The world's biggest building materials firm, Lafarge, faces legal action on accusations of paying taxes to ISIL in Syria in a bid to keep its factories there working. Lafarge now stands accused of financing terrorism and therefore complicity in war crimes. Lafarge is an industrial company with thousands of employees worldwide. Its hundreds of sites specialize in the production of cement. But the company denies any business links with any terrorists in Syria. RT's Peter Oliver has details.
Amid the heat of war, French concrete giant Lafarge stands accused of making what have been called worrying deals with Islamic State terrorists to keep their factory near Aleppo open, in effect paying taxes to ISIL to allow its employees through territory occupied by the terrorists. Now, the Paris-based legal collective Sherpa wants Lafarge investigated for complicity to commit war crimes and crimes against humanity, as well as financing terrorism. And they say they have the paper trail to prove it.
But this document shows that some payments were done to Daesh. And these payments are documented, and this is one of the arts of our accusations.
The company is one of the biggest names around when it comes to concrete. Examples of their work can be seen all across the world. Here in Berlin, they provided the materials for the construction of the memorial to Jews killed by the Nazis during the Holocaust. And now that same company stands accused of financing another group of mass murderers.
Taking the risk to commit to these offences and in accepting to maintain dangerous relationship, toxic relationship with EI, based on this commercial relationship and payments. This is an unprecedented complaint.
Lafarge declined our request for an interview, but did send this written statement in response to the allegations.
We won't comment on the information that Sherpa has lodged a complaint against Lafarge Holcim. According to our corporate principles, we have launched an internal investigation controlled by our auditing and financial departments. This investigation conforms to our business ethics code that strictly abides by existing laws, including the prohibition of cooperating with terrorist organizations.
But their accusers say that there are questions to be answered by the head office in Paris over why and how they were able to remain open when all other companies fled.
There is an interrogation based on the fact that first, all the main companies operating in this region left the region, the last one in 2012. So why Lafarge continue alone, lonely, at all their risk in 2013 and 2014, at a period where it was well known what was committed around.
The factory was abandoned in 2014 and has since become the base of operations for Western and Kurdish special forces in the region. While Lafarge vehemently denies any wrongdoing, it does seem that we're set for a long investigation into whether the French company paid off Islamic State to keep building its business. Peter Oliver, RT.
Protests against a controversial new oil pipeline have broken out in dozens of cities across America. They're the biggest since the government stopped the project in September. Thousands of people have rallied in support of Native American activists who are trying to persuade the government to stop or reroute the pipeline. Protesters gathered outside the offices of the company leading its construction, and it comes just a day after the firm delayed its decision to drill under a lake, the main source of clean water for Native Americans behind the protests. Now, some rallies turned violent as clashes erupted near the pipeline's path in North Dakota. Riot police used pepper spray and stun guns and arrested 26 people. One UN human rights expert has condemned the authorities' repeated use of force against demonstrators.
You have to get off the pickup and move to the south.
This is not okay.
Have to have you guys go south and we will put that fire out.
Tensions have escalated in the past 2 weeks, with local security forces employing an increasingly militarized response to protests and forcibly moving encampments located near the construction site.
The pipeline is designed to take crude oil through the Dakotas nearly 1,000 miles down to the state of Illinois. The Standing Rock Sioux Indian tribe warns the project crosses their sacred burial sites and threatens vital water resources. And we spoke to Solomon Commission, a founder of the Your World News program.
This is nothing new. This is, par for the course when it comes to the U.S.-sponsored state of policing. They oftentimes use heavy-handed and disproportionate one-sided violence against communities of color. For several years now, the United States has been using military-grade weapons that have been donated to them by the U.S. military. They've been given the green light by the federal government and local jurisdictions to use these weapons on human beings. In terms of this, it's good that the UN came out and said what is, what we all know is true. However, the only way that we're going to see any kind of change, there has to be solidarity from other groups.
Up next, you're on RT International. Larry King speaks to one of the world's best pound-for-pound boxers, Russia's Sergey Kovalov, ahead of the fight of the year against America's undefeated Andre Ward.